The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 1. Location: Brooklyn Heights, New York City. In Mosai, I never thought much about mirrors. They were just functional. Something to check my hair, maybe stare too long during a bout of writer's block. But something changed the third week after I moved into the studio in Brooklyn Heights. It was an old brick building, the kind with creaky floorboards and thin walls that carried conversations like whispers in your own ear. The apartment was on the top floor, tucked under the roof with slanted ceilings and a window view that could romanticize even the worst insomnia. I told myself it was the perfect place to finish my first novel. Quiet, isolated, just me, my thoughts, and my typewriter. I didn't even think twice about the fact that the door locked automatically, or that the hallway always seemed a little colder than it should have been. The first note showed up on a Tuesday, folded neatly on my desk chair, not on the desk, not on the floor, directly on the seat like someone wanted me to find it as soon as I sat down. It wasn't typed or printed, just messy handwriting in black ink. 8:32 a.m. oatmeal with honey. 1 spoonful too much, you noticed. I remember reading it 5 times before even reacting. It was true, down to the damn spoonful. I had been alone all morning. I hadn't left, no one had come in. I checked the windows, the front door, even the vents, everything was locked. I should have been terrified. But at first, I was just confused. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had written the note myself and forgotten. A weird mental glitch from working too many late nights. But I couldn't shake the handwriting. It wasn't mine. The letters, slanted left uneven, like the writer had been in a rush or distracted. I tossed it in the trash and tried to laugh it off. But that night I left the hallway light on. I told myself it was for the sake of visibility. The next morning I found another note. This one tucked under my pillow. 11:47 p.m. You got to check the hallway light. You stood there for 14 seconds, something moved. The paper felt cold in my hand. I hadn't told anyone. No cameras inside the apartment. I hadn't even opened a window. That's when my chest began to tighten. Not fear exactly, more like the moment before fear, the breath you hold before you admit something is wrong. I started writing less, not because I didn't have ideas, the opposite actually. The studio suddenly felt charged, like I was being watched. I'd sit at the desk, fingers hovering over the keys, but instead of writing fiction, I was listening. For creaks, breaths, shifts in air pressure, every little sound felt deliberate. On Thursday, I heard a drawer slide open in the kitchenette, but when I went to check, nothing had moved. The next note was already waiting on my desk, perfectly centered. 2:13 p.m. You heard it too. It wanted you to look. That's when I decided to check the building security footage. I needed to see that no one was coming in. The super was hesitant at first, muttering something about privacy policies and liability. But a crisp 50 slipped under his coffee cup, loosened. Things up. We watched the footage together, starting from Monday. Nothing. No visitors, no deliveries, just me. Leaving for groceries, returning, heading out for a walk, coming back. Then Tuesday. Again, only me. Over and over. No signs of forced entry. No strangers lingering in the hall. But as we reached Wednesday night, I saw something that made my stomach knot. At 11:47 p.m., I exited my bedroom and stood in the hallway, staring at the light. And behind me, in the polished glass of the doorframe, there was a reflection. Not a shadow. A full figure, same height, same build, same clothes, standing just behind me, unmoving. I paused the footage and leaned in. The figure didn't match any angle or light source. It was too defined, too solid. The worst part? I never turned around. I just stood there, then walked back to bed. The super mumbled something and left the room, clearly done with me. I copied the footage to a USB and took it upstairs, hands trembling slightly as I locked my apartment behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on and sat in the corner with my laptop, replaying the footage until dawn. Every time I paused it at that exact moment, the figure behind me looked clearer. more familiar. It wasn't just like me. It was me. The next day, I covered every mirror and reflective surface in the apartment with sheets and towels. I couldn't stand the idea of catching a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. But reflections aren't limited to mirrors. They live in windows, in darkened screens, even in the stainless steel kettle on the stove. I caught myself avoiding my own gaze, afraid that if I looked too long, I'd see something blink out of sync. That night, I locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and jammed a chair beneath the knob. Then I placed my phone on the desk to record video overnight, just in case. The next morning, the phone was off. Battery drained completely, and the final note was already on the keyboard. You shouldn't have tried to catch it. It doesn't like being seen. I thought about leaving. I almost did. Bags packed, cab waiting outside, but I stood in the living room, suitcase in hand, and I hesitated. What if it followed me? What if it was me? I didn't know how to explain that to anyone. Not without sounding like I'd lost it completely. I let the cab drive away. That night, I turned off all the lights, sat in the center of the apartment, and waited. No notes, no footsteps, no creaks or whispering walls. Just silence. For the first time in weeks, I almost felt normal again, until I stood to go to bed and passed the covered mirror in the hallway. I stopped. My reflection wasn't moving, it just stood there and frozen mid-step while I moved. My stomach dropped. I waved my hand. Nothing. The sheet over the mirror shifted slightly like there was a breeze, but the window was shut. I leaned in closer instinctively, trying to make out the face behind the fabric. That's when it smiled. Not a twitch or a reflex. A full, deliberate grin that stretched too wide. I stumbled backward, knocking into the wall. The reflection tilted its head, slow and jerky, like it was testing the motion. Then it took a step forward, and the sheet slipped off the mirror entirely. But there was nothing behind the glass. Just the dim outline of my apartment and that thing, my face but wrong, standing inside it. I bolted. Down the stairs, through the lobby, into the street. I didn't stop until I was 6 blocks away, bent over on a bench, gasping for air. I tried calling a friend, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. What would I even say? Hey, I think my reflection wants to replace me? I laughed out loud at the absurdity of it, and that's when I noticed my phone's screen. It was still on, camera app open, like it had been recording the whole time. And there, faint in the background, was a face over my shoulder. Eyes too wide, teeth too white, looking straight into the lens. I haven't been back to the apartment since. I called the landlord, made up a story about family emergencies and needing to break the lease early. Left the key with the super and booked a month-to-month rental in Queens. The notes haven't followed me. At least I don't think they have. But I've started noticing small things. My reflection blinking a little too late. A shadow in my bedroom that doesn't match anything in the room. Sometimes I hear typing in the middle of the night, even though my laptop is closed. Last week, I found a folded piece of paper under my pillow, blank. But when I held it up to the light, faint indentations appeared, the outline of my handwriting. I hadn't written anything. I'm not sure if it's trying to replace me or just be me. Maybe that's worse. I've avoided mirrors as much as I can, but it's hard. We're surrounded by reflections, in windows, in puddles, in the eyes of others. I've started filming myself while I sleep, just to make sure I'm the one who wakes up. If you're reading this, do me a favor. Check your mirrors. Watch the way you move, the way it moves, and if you ever see yourself smile, when you know you didn't, don't smile back. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 2. Location: French Quarter, New Orleans, LA. I used to think New Orleans was just jazz, beignets, and that intoxicating mix of charm and chaos. But I can't hear brass music anymore without feeling cold. My husband and I had booked a small Airbnb in the French Quarter to celebrate our 5th anniversary. A 1-story, Creole-style cottage tucked between a voodoo shop and an antique bookstore. The listing said it was cozy, private, and peacefully quiet. But the quiet never felt right. From the moment we walked in, the air felt stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. We chalked it up to old architecture and humidity. The place looked charming enough. Mismatched vintage furniture, chipped wooden floors, a clawfoot tub that groaned when it drained. It was exactly what we wanted. Something with personality. We dropped our bags, uncorked a bottle of wine, and spent the evening on the porch listening to the distant sounds of street performers and clinking glasses. It was only when we were getting ready for bed that I noticed the first thing that didn't make sense. The ceiling above our room creaked. Slow, deliberate footsteps. But the host had told us very clearly. The house was one level. There was no upstairs. My husband Nate paused while brushing his teeth, the tap still running. "Did you hear that?" he asked, tilting his head toward the ceiling. I nodded slowly. The steps had a rhythm, like someone pacing directly above us, heel, toe, and then stopping as if they were listening. We both laughed it off nervously. "Old buildings creak," I muttered. But the sound had weight to it. These weren't random groans of settling wood. They felt purposeful. We barely slept that night. Every hour or so, one of us would wake, up to some subtle noise. The soft thud of movement, a door clicking shut, a whisper that might have been the wind. At one point, Nate got up and checked the tiny attic crawl space above the kitchen. Even though the host had insisted it was sealed, shut it wasn't. The latch had been broken and the hatch hung slightly open like someone had forced their way in or out. Nate closed it without a word, but I saw the tightness in his jaw. Something was wrong, and we were both pretending it wasn't. The next morning, I found something wedged deep beneath the mattress while flipping it to smooth out the sheets. A thin, leather-bound journal, brittle with age and stained like it had been through a flood. There was no name on the cover. Inside, the handwriting shifted between neat cursive and frantic scrawl, like the person had started calm and slowly unraveled. The entries weren't dated, but they all described the same things we had heard the night before. Footsteps overhead, whispers through the vents, shadows moving behind closed doors. One entry ended mid-sentence. "He stood at the foot of the bed last night. I think he's..." I showed it to Nate. He laughed, but it was forced. "People love making this kind of crap up. Probably left it here as a prank," he said, flipping through the pages. Still, I noticed he kept glancing at the ceiling afterward. Later that day, I messaged the host and asked about the journal. He responded quickly. "No idea. First time I'm hearing of that. Maybe left by a previous guest." But there was something in the way the message was phrased. Too quick, too dismissive. And when I tried to ask about the crawl space, he didn't reply. That night, things escalated. I woke up to the sound of Nate whispering. At first, I thought he was talking in his sleep, but when I turned over, I saw him standing in the middle of the room, completely still, facing the corner. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear the words. I called his name, once, then louder, and he slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes were wide open, but there was nothing behind them. It was like he didn't recognize me. Then, just like that, he blinked and asked why I was yelling. He didn't remember getting out of bed. I wanted to leave. I told him we should pack our things and find a hotel, maybe even leave the city altogether. But Nate insisted he was fine. "You're letting this place get in your head," he said, trying to sound reassuring. I knew he was lying. I could see it in the way his hands trembled when he reached for his coffee. That day felt stretched and unreal. Lights flickered without cause. My phone kept resetting the time, jumping hours forward, then back again. And the attic hatch, the one Nate had closed, was open again. By the third night, I couldn't tell what was worse, the silence or the sounds. Around 2 a.m., I heard Nate get out of bed. I assumed he was going to the bathroom, but after several minutes, he hadn't returned. I got up to look for him and found the bedroom empty, the front door wide open, swaying slightly like it had just been closed moments before. I stepped out, into the hallway, heart racing, and called his name. No response, just the faint creak of floorboards above me. But there was no above. I searched the entire house, every room, every corner, calling for him over and over. Eventually, I found him in the kitchen, barefoot and staring at the wall, his fingers twitching like he was trying to grasp something invisible. Behind him, for a split second, I saw movement. A figure just out of focus, too tall, too still, standing where the shadows pooled. But when I turned on the light, there was nothing. Nate blinked, looked around, and asked what I was doing up so late. I didn't answer. I just backed away slowly, suddenly terrified to take my eyes off him. On the fourth morning, Nate was gone. No note, no signs of struggle. Just his side of the bed still slightly warm. I ran outside, yelling his name into the street, but it was like he had evaporated. Panicked, I called the police. They took my statement and said they'd look into it. While they were checking the property, I remembered the Airbnb had cameras, one above the front door, one in the living room. I asked the officer if he could pull the footage. He agreed, hesitantly, and we watched it together on his laptop. At 3:17 a.m., the video showed Nate walking calmly through the living room, eyes open but empty, like he was sleepwalking. And behind him, someone was following. A tall, gaunt figure, featureless, colorless, like a shadow barely holding itself together. Its movements didn't make sense. It flickered like a broken frame in an old film reel. And then, just before Nate reached the front door, he turned to the camera and smiled. Not at it, at me. The video ended there. That was 3 days ago. I'm still in the Airbnb. The attic hatch opened again last night. I haven't looked inside yet. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 3. Location: Marina District, San Francisco, CA. I never liked taking photos indoors. Something about artificial light always killed the mood, flattened the soul of the frame. Still, when I found the listing for that sleek house in the Marina District, overlooking the Golden Gate like a postcard brought to life, I thought, maybe this time would be different. I was burned out, chasing fog and golden hour light across. The West Coast had drained me, and I needed something quiet, still. The place was all concrete angles and glass, the kind of modern minimalism that looks sterile in person but photographs like a dream. I booked it for a week. Just me, my Leica, and the silence. The first few days were uneventful. I shot the bridge at dawn, the sailboats drifting like teeth across the bay, the city turning gold before my eyes. But inside the house, nothing. No matter where I aimed my lens, hallways, corners, reflections, it all came out cold and dead, until Thursday morning. I snapped a casual shot of the living room mirror. Later, reviewing it on my laptop, I noticed a figure. A man standing behind me, face blurry but unmistakably there. Only, I was alone when I took it. I told myself it was a glitch, a light artifact, maybe something refracted in the glass. But the next shot, taken in the kitchen, had a woman in it. She was just standing by the sink, hands at her sides, head tilted, slightly like she was listening to something. Again, I hadn't seen anyone. The house was dead quiet. I walked through every room, checked the closets, even opened every drawer like that would somehow explain it. Nothing. The doors were locked. The windows shut. My phone showed no signs of tampering, but I felt watched. That night I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on, my camera close, flipping through every photo I'd taken since arriving. In 5 different shots there were people, different people, none of them familiar, none of them visible at the time of the capture. Always blurry, always looking at the camera, and always closer. In the latest one, the man from the first photo stood just inside the bedroom door. I remembered taking that photo. I'd been testing light bounce off the walls. I was certain I had been alone. Friday morning, I decided to leave. Enough was enough. I packed my gear, grabbed my laptop, and headed for the front door. But when I tapped the digital lock screen to disengage it, it didn't respond. Just a red ring and a soft chime. I tried the manual override, nothing. The keypad flashed like it was rebooting, then went dark. My phone wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi anymore, and there was no signal inside the house. I pressed my face to the glass. Outside, the world was still normal. People walking their dogs, the bridge in the distance. But inside, it felt like the walls were leaning in. I wandered the house for hours, trying every window, every possible escape. That's when I found the room I swear hadn't been there before. Behind a door, I thought led to the laundry. Inside was a wall of shelves, filled with old photo albums, thick, leather-bound, heavy with dust. I opened one, then another, hundreds of photographs, all taken inside this house. Different people in every set, men, women, couples, posed stiffly in rooms I recognized, but they all had the same expression. Wide eyes, mouths slightly open like they'd just seen something behind the camera. The deeper I flipped through the albums, the more disturbing the images became. In the beginning, the guests looked relaxed, casual, but then their postures grew tense. In some, their eyes were fixed on a corner of the frame. In others, they were mid-turn, as if they'd heard something. And always, those same shadowy figures appeared behind them. Different positions, closer each time. I found one album near the bottom of the stack labeled only with a date, March 2006. The man in those photos looked a lot like me. Same dark hair, same camera strap across his chest. The final photo was of him standing in the bedroom, staring directly at the lens, alone. But the mirror behind him showed 3 people standing at his back. I backed out of the room and slammed the door. It didn't feel like I was alone anymore. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fridge sent my heart into my throat. I stopped taking pictures. I didn't want to see what I wasn't seeing. But that night, I couldn't help it. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of a shutter click. My camera, still on the tripod, had taken a photo on its own. I walked to it, hands shaking, and looked at the preview. There I was, sleeping on the couch. And behind me, barely visible in the reflection of the window, a woman crouched low, watching. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with my back to the wall, lights on, camera off. I didn't care about the deposit anymore. I was going to break a window if I had to. But in the morning, every window was covered. Not boarded up, covered from the outside with what looked like thick matte black paint. No light came through. I checked the time. 11:24 a.m. The house was as dark as midnight. That was when I noticed the smell. Something sweet, almost rotting, like fruit left in the sun too long. It clung to the back of my throat. I followed it, half hypnotized, until I reached the hallway outside the photo room. The door was open now. Inside, the albums were gone. In their place was a single Polaroid pinned to the far wall with a pushpin. I got closer, heart hammering, and saw that it was a photo of me, taken from the stairwell, the same angle I'd passed every night on the way to bed. I was standing still in the image, my eyes wide, mouth slightly open, just like the others. I didn't remember that moment. I didn't remember being watched. But the thing that undid me was the second figure. The photo, a man, blurry, standing behind me, and his hand was on my shoulder. I ran. I didn't even think. I just bolted for the garage, hoping I could find a crowbar, a jack, anything to break my way out. The lights flickered as I moved. Something, or someone, was walking above me. Slow, deliberate steps that paused every few seconds like they were listening. I found a rusted tire iron in a cabinet and sprinted to the nearest window. 1 hit, 2, 3. The glass didn't crack. It didn't even shiver. Just reflected me, wide-eyed, trembling, tire iron raised. And behind my reflection, 4 figures now. Faces pale, almost featureless, standing still, watching. That was 2 nights ago. I don't know how long I've been here anymore. My watch died this morning. The smell is worse now, and the dark doesn't go away no matter how many lights I turn on. The camera keeps taking photos on its own. I find them in folders I didn't create, images of me sleeping, sitting, staring at nothing. And in each one, they get closer. If anyone sees this, if I find a way to get it out, I just want to warn you. Don't take photos in this house. Don't look through a lens. Don't even look too long in the mirror, because once they know you can see them, they don't stop. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 4. Location: Wicker Park, Chicago, IL. I don't usually remember my dreams, but every night I stayed in that apartment, I woke up with the distinct feeling that someone had been watching me sleep. Not like a nightmare, more like a presence that had been there and gone, leaving behind the faintest scent of something sour and damp. I booked the place in Wicker Park because it was cheap and close to campus, and I needed a quiet spot to cram for finals. It looked decent enough in the pictures. Clean, modern, small. Just a single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a narrow hallway leading to the bathroom. Nothing fancy. Perfect for a broke college student. The first night I didn't notice anything. Strange. I was too tired from hauling my suitcase up 3 flights of stairs and setting up my laptop and books. But on the second morning, I found my charger on the floor across the room. I thought maybe I knocked it over in my sleep, though I couldn't explain why it would be coiled so neatly. The next day, my toothbrush was lying horizontally across the sink, not where I left it. Small things, easy to brush off. But by the 4th night, I was double-checking where I placed everything before bed, snapping photos with my phone just to prove I wasn't going crazy. It was around 2:30 a.m. on the 5th night when I woke up to the sound of something soft dragging across the floor. Not loud, more like fabric brushing wood. I held my breath, straining to hear more, but the apartment was still. I got up and checked the main room. Nothing. The door was locked, the windows closed. I told myself it must have been the building settling or maybe a neighbor upstairs. But when I turned back toward my room, I felt that same sensation again. Like I'd just missed someone standing there. That morning, I noticed the closet door was open. I always kept it shut. Not out of habit, but because it didn't close properly unless you slammed it. Still, it was cracked just slightly, as if someone had peeked out from inside. I stared at it for a while, then laughed. It off telling myself I must have left it open by accident. But something in my gut tightened. That night before going to bed, I set my laptop on the desk and enabled the webcam to record while I slept. Just in case. I didn't expect to find anything. I only wanted peace of mind. The footage the next morning nearly made me drop my coffee. Around 3:17 a.m., there was a subtle shift in the frame. The closet door, closed when I went to sleep, eased open in complete silence. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, someone, stepped out. A figure, hunched low and barefoot, crept out from the shadows behind the closet. It wasn't until they turned slightly that I realized there was a gap in the back wall, a narrow, almost invisible panel that led somewhere deeper. My blood ran cold. The person stood at the foot of my bed, watching me, for nearly an hour. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, breathing. I could barely see their face in the dim light, but the stillness of it, the way they didn't blink, didn't shift weight, made my skin crawl. Then, without a sound, they turned and slipped back into the closet, disappearing through that secret panel like they'd never been there. I sat staring at the screen for minutes, maybe more. My first instinct was to call the police. My second was to throw up. But what would I even say? That I caught a ghost on camera? That someone was living inside the walls? I didn't sleep the next night. I kept the lights on, sat at the desk with a kitchen knife, and waited. Nothing happened. No sound, no movement. I even left the closet door wide open to see if anything would trigger again. Still nothing. When the sun came up, I convinced myself it was over. Maybe whoever it was had seen the camera. Maybe they left. But just as I started to breathe easier, I checked the footage again out of habit. This time, the video stopped recording. Abruptly at 2:41 a.m., the file was corrupted, or deleted. I packed my stuff, I didn't even bother folding my clothes. I just shoved everything into my duffel and booked an Uber to stay at a friend's place across town. Before I left, though, I decided to do one more thing. I took a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and pried at the back of the closet. The panel gave way more easily than I expected. Behind it was a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a person. I shined my phone flashlight in. The air was stale and warm. The walls were covered in what looked like scratch marks, and something else writing. It wasn't graffiti. The writing was carved, almost etched into the wall over and over. The same sentence repeated. I only watch. I don't touch. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. Farther in, I saw a crumpled blanket, food wrappers, and a small stack of Polaroids. Most were blurry or too dark to make out, but one photo was crystal clear. It was me, asleep in the bed, the timestamp matching the night before. The angle was close, too close. Whoever took it had been standing inches from my face. I stumbled out of the passage, slammed the closet shut, and ran. I reported the listing to Airbnb immediately, uploading the photos and the remaining footage. Their response was cold, an automated message thanking me and assuring me that my concern had been noted. But a few hours later, I got a real email. Not from Airbnb, but from a Chicago PD address. The officer said the apartment had been delisted 6 months ago after a tenant reported someone living inside the walls. There had been an investigation. A man was arrested. The place was supposed to be sealed. So how was it listed again? The officer didn't know. Airbnb claimed there must have been a glitch, that it was an unauthorized reactivation. But someone had cleaned the place. Someone had updated the photos. Someone had responded to my messages and confirmed my booking. The email chain was real, the contact info real. But when I tried calling the number, it had been disconnected. I pressed the officer for more, but he just said the case was being reviewed. That's the last I heard from them. Sometimes, late at night, I still check Airbnb out of morbid curiosity. The listing is gone now, completely scrubbed. But a week ago, I saw a new one pop up in Wicker Park. Same layout. Same furniture. Slightly different angles. No reviews. I didn't click it, I couldn't. But the profile photo of the host, it looked familiar. Not the face. The background behind him. There was a closet door, slightly open. And I swear to God, I saw an eye watching from the dark. If you're from Chicago and you've stayed somewhere that felt off, please tell me I'm not the only one. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 5. Location: Hollywood Hills, Los Angeles, CA. I know how ridiculous this sounds. Trust me, I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to convince myself it's just stress, that the algorithm is playing tricks on me. But last night, something happened. Something I can't unsee. And now, I haven't touched my phone. I haven't opened the curtains. I've just been sitting here staring at the front door, waiting for something I can't even name. I moved into this place 3 days ago. It's this absurdly luxurious mansion up in the Hollywood Hills. Rented it for a month to shoot some exclusive content, collabs, you know. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a spiral staircase straight out of a dream. The kind of house you only see in music videos. It felt like a steal on the listing, honestly. The agency said it was briefly available between owners. I didn't think much of that phrasing at the time. Now I can't stop thinking about it. The first night was fine, mostly. I did a quick live stream tour. My followers were obsessed with the house. Some even recognized it from old celebrity gossip blogs. But the weird comments started almost immediately. Who's the woman in the upstairs window? Check the mirror at 2:14. I laughed it off. Figured it was just trolls trying to get a reaction. But when I rewatched the video, I saw it. In the mirror by the grand piano, a face, pale, eyes too wide. Standing just behind me. But I was alone. Still, I tried to brush it off. Maybe a weird lighting glitch, a shadow from the chandelier. I even told myself it was a compression artifact, something about how live video distorts. But that night, I kept waking up. No sounds, just this pressure in my chest, like I couldn't fully breathe. I chalked it up to altitude or maybe anxiety. But every time I opened my eyes, I swore the hallway light outside my bedroom was on, and I hadn't left it that way. The second day, things escalated. I was filming a skincare routine in the upstairs bathroom. Nothing fancy, just natural light and a ring light. Midway through, the footage started glitching. Not the usual digital static, this was it off. Like the walls behind me pulsed for a second. And then, in a single frame, my face wasn't mine. I don't know how else to explain it. Same makeup, same angle, but the eyes were hollow. Like whoever was looking through them wasn't supposed to be there. I posted a heavily edited version anyway, trying not to spiral. That's when a follower, a lethal.romance, I'll never forget the name, sent me a DM. No message. Just a link to a grainy, decade-old video on some forgotten platform. A home. Tour, same house, same layout, same spiral staircase, and the girl walking through it, she looked exactly like me. Not kind of. Not influencer look-alike vibes. I mean exact. Even had the same nervous laugh I do when I film alone. The video was only 5 minutes long, but it felt like hours. She walks from room to room, narrating like she's filming for fun, mentioning how she just moved in, how she's planning to redecorate. But then, near the end, she pauses in front of the same mirror by the piano. Her voice falters. She stares into the glass, tilts her head. "That's weird," she says. Then she leans closer, squinting. "Wait, is that..." And right there, the frame cuts. The screen goes black. No outro. No upload history after that. I tried to find her name, her socials, anything. Nothing. I barely slept that night. I left every light on, sat in bed with my laptop open, trying to rationalize what I saw. Deepfake? Maybe. But this video was time-stamped 2013, way before this tech was even mainstream. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. Not footsteps exactly. More like a shuffle, the drag of something soft across hardwood floors. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed. To the hallway. Nothing. Just that same hallway light flickering faintly. I reached for the switch to turn it off, and it was already in the off position. This morning, I decided to leave. I didn't even pack, just grabbed my keys, wallet, and phone. But when I opened the front door, everything looked wrong. The driveway was still there, my rental car too. But the sky had this gray tint, like a storm was coming, even though my weather app said clear skies, and the air felt heavy, not humid, dense, like walking through water. I stepped outside anyway, but after a few feet my vision blurred, and this high-pitched ringing started in my ears. I stumbled back inside, and the moment I crossed the threshold, it stopped. I don't know what's happening to me. I tried calling the agency that rented me the house, but the number is disconnected. Their website? Gone. Just a 404 error. I tried checking my own content. Every video I've posted since arriving here is either corrupted or gone, even the live stream. It's like the internet erased any trace of me being here, except for one video, just one, the skincare routine. But when I play it now, it's not me in the frame. She looks like me, sounds like me, but she never blinks, not once. I've locked every door and window, closed the blinds, shut off all the lights. I can't leave and no one seems to know I'm here anymore. I keep hearing things, soft knocks behind the walls, footsteps above me, even though the floor plan is single story. And every time I pass a mirror, there's this delay. Just half a second, like my reflection is thinking about what to do next. I tried filming it, but the footage won't save. It's like this house rejects any attempt to prove what's happening inside. Right now, as I write this, the mirror across the room is fogging up. The rest of the house is cold, dead quiet, but that one spot is misted over like someone's breathing on the other side. I swear I just saw a hand press against it. Not mine, longer fingers. And it left a smudge, 5 perfect streaks, dragging downward. I don't know how much longer I'll last in here. If you're seeing this post, please comment. Tell me you see it too. Tell me I'm not already gone.